While the world was looking at Beijing, something shifted. Quietly, decisively. For the first time in more than 20 years, China is no longer the undisputed king of American trade. The balance moved, not across an ocean, but across a border. And very few noticed it at first because global attention was locked on tariffs, trade wars, and political theater. But on the ground, in the shadows of the Sierra Madre, a new kind of empire was rising. Factories glowed through the night, steel frames climbed skyward where desert once lay barren, and conveyor belts hummed in perfect rhythm. This was not just industrial growth. It was a seismic shift in global commerce. Mexico was no longer merely America's neighbor. It was becoming the new global factory floor. For decades, the global economy operated under a simple, unspoken rule. Build it in China, consume it in America. Container ships crossed the Pacific like clockwork, moving products with surgical precision. Costs were low, timing was precise, and the system was efficient. Entire supply chains were mapped to ensure nothing was wasted. The world assumed this formula would continue indefinitely. But by 2025, the system cracked. Shipping costs had tripled. Ports choked under congestion. Trade wars transformed supply chains into weapons. And the once celebrated just-in-time model of manufacturing became just too late. The Pacific Ocean, which had served as the artery of global trade for decades, became a bottleneck. A 20-day voyage was no longer a measure of efficiency, it was exposure. Exposure to tariffs, to sanctions, to geopolitical tensions that could grind commerce to a halt. Corporations didn't abandon China out of ideology or political protest. They left because the math stopped making sense. Every day a shipment lingered at a congested port, companies lost millions. Every delay in a critical component created a domino effect, halting entire production lines. The predictable rhythm of global commerce became erratic, and investors began asking hard questions. Nearshoring, once a speculative concept discussed in business journals and economic think tanks, became a survival strategy. In Mexico, distance collapsed. A container that once drifted across the Pacific now rolls across the border in less than a day. Factories in Monterrey feed warehouses in Texas before the sun rises. Speed replaced scale. Proximity replaced volume. The paradigm of global manufacturing had shifted, and the effects were profound. This isn't theory, it's happening right now with names attached that everyone recognizes. Tesla, Amazon, Samsung, Apple. The largest manufacturers in the world are redrawing their operational maps, and nowhere is that more evident than in northern Mexico, where one corporate announcement sent shockwaves across the global economy. Giga Mexico isn't just a factory, it's a signal. Elon Musk's $10 billion investment in Monterrey is more than a bet on cars. It is a bet on gravity itself. When Tesla moves, entire ecosystems follow. Suppliers were presented with a simple choice: relocate to Mexico or lose your contract. And many did not hesitate. Steel, batteries, semiconductors, electronics, entire supply chains uprooted themselves almost overnight. What was once a patchwork of distant vendors and overseas production now coalesced into sprawling industrial corridors in northern Mexico. Cities that relied on agriculture and local commerce suddenly found themselves transformed into hubs of high-tech production. Roads, housing, and infrastructure followed factories, creating urban ecosystems almost overnight. This is not the Mexico of the 1990s. This is not a nation exporting cheap labor while innovation happens elsewhere. Today, Mexico graduates more engineers annually than the United States. Robotics labs stand beside assembly lines. Software teams collaborate with machinists. Universities have shifted their focus toward industrial design, AI integration, and advanced manufacturing technology. The country is no longer simply building products. It is designing them, imagining the future, and producing it in real time. Mexico is emerging from the periphery of global manufacturing and moving toward its center. Manufacturing output is surging. Industrial parks are expanding faster than roads, utilities, or housing developments can keep up. Wages are rising as companies compete for skilled labor. Middle-class neighborhoods are forming where farmland once dominated. For the first time in generations, Mexico is not exporting people, it is importing capital. The streets of Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City are no longer filled primarily with commuters traveling to service jobs. They are filled with engineers, technicians, and managers moving between high-tech plants. Cafes, co-working spaces, and innovation incubators spring up alongside factories, creating vibrant economic microcosms. Yet, while the story of growth is compelling, it is also complex. Here comes the twist that caught Washington off guard. China did not leave the game. It changed its uniform. As American corporations pulled out of Chinese industrial zones, Chinese capital quietly crossed the Pacific, embedding itself in Mexican industrial parks. Chinese firms are now some of the largest investors in Mexican real estate, from warehouses to assembly plants to logistics hubs. They are not exporting finished goods to the United States. They are producing them on U.S. soil or just across the border. By operating within Mexico, Chinese companies bypass U.S. tariffs under the USMCA trade agreement. On paper, the products are Mexican. In reality, the ownership, machinery, and supply chains still trace back to China. It's a sophisticated geopolitical maneuver, one that allows Beijing to maintain influence while operating under a different name. Cranes dot the skyline, factories hum with activity, and traffic pulses below like a living circuit. It is a country no longer waiting for permission to matter. It is already shaping the next era of global trade. Yet the horizon is not without shadows. Energy shortages, infrastructure bottlenecks, and geopolitical maneuvering create constant tension. Every day, Mexico balances on the edge of opportunity and risk. Crossroads define nations. If Mexico manages this surge with foresight, investment, and strategy, it becomes a manufacturing superpower that reshapes global commerce. If it mismanages, the weight of rapid growth could overwhelm infrastructure, social cohesion, and economic stability. Investors, policymakers, and industrialists around the world are watching closely. The question is no longer whether Mexico will matter. It's whether it can manage its rise sustainably. The era of the Pacific is ending. The era of the border has begun. The global map of manufacturing is no longer defined by the waters of the Pacific Ocean, but by highways, railroads, and industrial corridors stretching across Mexico. Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City are emerging as the new centers of gravity for American supply chains. The country that once exported labor now imports capital, technology, and influence. And yet, the story is not only economic, it is deeply human. The engineers designing Tesla's next-generation electric vehicle in Monterrey are the same generation whose parents labored in factories decades ago. Neighborhoods are evolving. Cities are growing not only in size but in sophistication. Cafes, schools, and cultural centers flourish alongside industrial parks. This transformation affects the way people live, work, and imagine the future. Mexico is not merely changing its economy. It is changing its identity. From the rooftop of a high-rise, looking across the glittering expanse of Mexico City, one can see both the promise and the challenge. Cranes tower like sentinels over sprawling neighborhoods. Trucks move like veins carrying lifeblood through industrial zones. This is a country no longer in the shadows, waiting for the world to notice. It is already shaping the future of trade and manufacturing. One thing is clear. The era of the Pacific is ending. The era of the border has begun. And the consequences of this shift will be felt not only in the factories of Monterrey or the streets of Mexico City, but in boardrooms from New York to Shanghai. If you want to understand the forces moving the world's money before they make headlines, subscribe to Hustle and Bustle. We'll take you behind the factories, across borders, and into the boardrooms shaping the next era of global trade. The future is no longer across an ocean. It is just over the border.